Hello and welcome to Rediscovering Childhood, a podcast that brings you lots of practical information to help you become a more conscious parent. This podcast is brought to you by Discovery Playtime, an Irish business that provides high-quality educational and sensory toys to help your children develop skills through play. Visit discoveryplaytime.ie or download the app to get inspired. Welcome to Rediscovering Childhood. Today I welcome Erica Hargaden, and she's a child sleep consultant and from Babogue. And hello, Erica, how are you?
Hello, thank you so much for having me today.
And I hope we don't fall asleep during the podcast today.
Not.
There'll be a lot of sleep talking today.
I don't have a history of actually putting people to sleep.
No.
They can physically in front of me. Maybe this might be a first. I hope not. No, I hope we have a great chat now about all things sleep.
Yeah. I'd like to ask, why is sleep so important? What happens during sleep?
Well, it's one of the most important body processes that we have. And in terms of the pillars of health, it would be the first pillar of health. If we are not sleeping, then none of the other pillars are likely to be functioning at their optimum capacity. So there are things that happen while we're sleeping that don't happen in the daytime, like things that happen around proteins being released off the brain, body processes around major organs. And really, sleeping is about resting and restoring, and in particular, brain function rest and restore. And that's why if you are sleep deprived, you are more likely to be suffering in some way from a mental health capacity. You know, we're more likely to go towards darkness, dark thoughts, depressive anxiety when we're not sleeping. And it's one of the reasons that sleep, awfully is used as a form of torture, because you will literally nearly do anything to get your sleep back. So really, when we're not sleeping, then we are not working at our optimum capacity. Our body's not going to be functioning physically, and our brain is not going to be functioning well either. And those two combined, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And what are the main challenges for children? Let's start with babies. So do the reasons why, the challenges why they might not sleep or wake up during the night are obviously different as children grow up older.
Yeah.
So what would be the main challenges for babies?
You could do an entire 40 minutes just talking about challenges for each developmental stage. But you're right, sleep evolves. And really, we start life with very little sleep skills whatsoever. The body doesn't
So sleep is a skill.
It is a skill and a process.
Okay.
So we have functioning in our body that is sleep, but we also have to do some things to support it ourselves. And as parents, it's our job to lead our children towards settled foundations around sleep. So when we're born, we actually don't really have any sleep cycles or processes at all. We don't have the difference between REM and non-REM sleep. We don't come into light sleep and deep sleep. It's just one sleep level, and that's it. So we'll often hear from parents that in the beginning, children are very sleepy and they just sleep all the time. And that's because of their journey into the world, and they've got so much growth and development going on, because sleep is so deeply related to the brain that the body just needs all that time to sleep to start their learning process. And really, the big challenges that come up often really start to rear their head after 4 months. Because after 4 months of age is when the sleep cycles do form. And you may have had a child that was kind of sleeping for some periods of time overnight, but then because the sleep cycles are formed, they start to wake more frequently than they were previously. And really, if you've had a newborn up to 4 months and 6 months and beyond, if the sleep pattern hasn't settled, parents will really start to struggle at that point. We have this new trimester that we talk about after babies are born, and women still have a lot of the hormone releases to support them in some of the sleep deprivation and the changes that come. But when you get beyond the 4 and 6 months, that's where, if they're not settled into some level of a sleeping pattern, we'll start to struggle. So you're going to find it that They maybe are waking every 2 to 4 hours overnight. That's certainly what happened to me. My son was waking every hour and it was very, very chronic. Maybe no pattern of napping at all, like waking after very, very short naps. Maybe they're waking at like 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning and not returning to sleep at all. So not getting back down into their sleep. Being very, very reliant on repetitive processes for them to fall asleep and also maintain their sleep as well. That would be extremely common. That it's a real challenge to get them to go to sleep. Like, you know, constant bopping maybe on a ball, having to drive the car for hours. They're the very common things that would be reported.
I spend so much money on diesel driving around to get them to sleep.
And at the moment, diesel's really expensive.
It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Yes, like I have a sibling who, you know, was doing that with one of his 5 children, driving around at all ends of the day and night through Dublin. Said if they stopped at traffic lights, the little dude would wake up. So these are the very common things reported. And let's face it, in the newborn phase, sleep challenges are part and parcel. That is just fact. And really and truly, we need to prepare ourselves as parents to be, I suppose, mentally able to deal with that. Our sleep will be disrupted. You know, if we've got a partner or a friend or family member in our life that they tag team with us so that we're able to get some additional sleep. But it's when we go maybe beyond the newborn phase that if the sleep challenges remain or they get worse, that's when maybe trying to learn as much as you can about how to support your child in their changing sleep is where I would direct parents to start. You don't necessarily need to go immediately seek out the help of a sleep consultant. Just start reading, start educating yourself, listening to podcasts, you know, getting in front of like an Instagram account that resonates with you in terms of their content. Get to know what your parenting style feels like, what you maybe would like your sleep picture to look like in your home. And if you can get to grips with that, then you're taking a good step forward in terms of supporting your child and their sleep and your own sleep going forward. Because if your, you know, little one is not sleeping, well, then you're not sleeping either. And, you know, that can be really, really challenging because it can be very foggy for a parent. Like, they're not sleeping, I'm not sleeping. How do I get on top of this? And it can feel very, very overwhelming.
Yeah. What are the best habits to start creating with a newborn as a parent?
I love to advise parents to start the day at a regular time and to focus in on light exposure. So even for a very, very small baby, you know, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, that's when there is some hormone development around sleep. So when you see the first social smiles, there's actually the start of cortisol and melatonin, and they're the 2 main hormones in relation to sleep. So when you start to see those, I would recommend you go, right, I'm going to start my day at a regular time. I generally recommend 7 a.m, but I also recognise that if you've had a terrible night, that's hard. So be kind to yourself. Starting your day somewhere between 7 and 8, get a bit of light exposure, both of you. So get outside, even do your first feed outside, you know, wrap everybody up. There's a nice little bit of light exposure there. And then you can start to formulate loose, flexible routine. So really getting to know what your child's sleepy cues are and their wake periods that might be recommended. So like a 6 or 8 week baby might be only staying awake 45 minutes, maybe an hour between sleeps, but offering them a sleep opportunity during the day in those kind of time frames so that we get into like a pattern around napping. If you're doing that, then you are ticking massive body regulation boxes and you're starting the process of formulating loose routine, which will stand to baby and stand to you as they grow and develop.
Okay, so for what you said here, I think it sounds like the whole day routine is just as important as the bedtime routine.
Yeah, like daytime sleep and nighttime sleep are slightly different, but they're linked. So where you have a baby that is well rested from daytime sleep, then they are more likely to do longer spells of sleep overnight and have a night's sleep that they're developmentally capable of. And each child will be slightly different in respect of that. But if you have, you know, a 2-month-old baby and they're doing a 6-hour stretch overnight and sleeping well during the day, you're winning. You're absolutely winning. Now, every baby will be different. Some 8-week-olds will be waking 3 hours overnight, 4 hours overnight. It'll be very, very different. But trying to get to grips with that loose daytime routine. If you could see me now, like I'm doing all those loose movements, like I really can't emphasize that enough. Loose and flexible rather than strict and scheduled for children works far better. So focus in on that, just getting to know them. So their sleepy cues, are they rubbing their eyes? Are they pulling at their ears? You know, those big yawns, zoning out, even redness around the eyebrows can be a sign that, you know, they're getting sleepy cues, and offering them a sleep opportunity. That can be holding them to sleep. That could be going in the car, like whatever floats your boat. That can be going out for a walk. It doesn't have to be in a dark environment at that point. You can go with whatever works for you, but it's just getting into that body regulation piece. That's all.
Yeah. And is it true that when they're overtired, then it's even harder to fall asleep?
Yes, absolutely. So I mentioned cortisol already, which would be known as the fight or flight hormone, but it's not that you get a fright and cortisol is produced and that's the only time it's produced. It's actually produced all day long, and it's part of sleep pressure. So like we wake up in the morning, cortisol levels are at their lowest, and as the day goes on, they build and they build and they build, and it adds to sleep pressure. And with children, they need a release from that sleep pressure throughout the day. So that's why they need to nap. That's why they need that like downtime, and very small babies need it more often. So cortisol will create overtiredness. Now, I have a little bit of an aversion to overemphasizing overtiredness because I think it's been so widely promoted in let's say my circles over the last 5 years that parents actually fear it. And as a result, I've had loads of clients with children that are actually undertired, and that's the issue, that they've been put down too early, you know, too early for naps and too early for bedtime, and then not maintaining their sleep.
Forced into sleep.
It's a fine line, and that's why getting to know your baby and what suits them is important, but also get to know the guidelines. You know, what's the guide here? And I think anybody who follows me or listens to my work will hear me say that all the time. What's the guide? Well, it's just a guide. You know, so that's the guide. And then let's get to know our child and see where they are within the guide. Are they in the range? Are they slightly outside of the range? If they're outside of the range, that's okay, because that's your individual child.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to have, as you mentioned, all this information, but also don't listen to anybody else.
Well, yes, stay in your own lane.
You know, that works for me. You know, everyone is really good at telling you what worked for them and that you should do the same, but only you know your child.
Absolutely. Like what worked for me with my children is actually irrelevant, because that's what suited my parenting style. And I focus in on, for parents, well, what's the evidence-based sleep information here, and what are all the different ways that I could improve my child's sleep that fit within my parenting style. And like, yes, one of those worked really well for me, but that mightn't necessarily work for the client that comes to work with me. So I like to get to know the parents in front of me and hear about the child's temperament, and then maybe make recommendations. But it all goes back to the developmental stage, the evidence-based information that we know about sleep. And sleep is quite newly studied. Like it's really only something that the medical world is putting a lot of emphasis on at the moment. There's quite an awakening around sleep currently. So, you know, there's a lot of studies going on, and those studies, you know, they are going to bring new information. So I keep trying to educate myself so that I can then bring that information to families as well. So yes, stay in your own lane. What worked for your sister and your auntie and your mammy may not necessarily work for you as a parent or for your child.
Yeah. And see, when the child wakes up so many times during the night, what are the things that we should not do?
Okay.
I think it's easier than the things we should do.
It probably is. It is easier. But again, it's down to developmental stage. So the one thing I would like parents to focus in on is what we should not do around safe sleep. So get to know what the safe sleep guidelines are. The American Academy of Pediatrics safe sleep guidelines are the like Bible of safe sleep. But every jurisdiction's version will kind of start with them and then it'll vary. So for example, In Ireland, it says about using cellular blankets, that they're okay, but that's actually loose bedding, and that wouldn't be recommended under the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines. Okay, so I always direct parents to those. There's a full blog on my website that outlines them in full. Get to know them and practice those. And I think if you're starting out your parenting, getting to know those will help you with the what not to do, because that's just around child safety. That's around keeping your precious little one as safe as possible in their sleeping environment. And then after that, it's really about getting to know that, you know, habit forms quite easily and quickly. So if you don't want to co-sleep, then, you know, taking them into the bed with you is something maybe to avoid. If you want to co-sleep, brilliant, just do it safely. If you have a situation where your baby has maybe stopped feeding overnight, but, you know, they start to wake more frequently, then maybe returning to feeding where a feeding is not necessarily needed, that could become habit forming. You know, so it's about trying to avoid creating a new thing to get them to go back to sleep. And I kind of don't believe in the do's and do nots. It's about knowing what you maybe do want to do or do not want to do in terms of your family sleep picture, and avoid those.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Keep things safe and then think about what you really want, what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, like obviously if your child is sick, meet needs, like 100%, meet your child's needs, meet them where they're at, you know. And then after that, if you're kind of going, well, you know, X, Y, and Z, they're, you know, they're changed, they're healthy, they're good, I'm not too sure what's going on here. You know, obviously provide your comfort level, return them to their sleep environment and try and get them back into their sleeping pattern. But keeping in mind that you might need to look at something that's happening during the day, which we've already touched on, in terms of improving the overnight picture.
Yeah. Is there anything like that would help during the day, like going to baby classes and all that sort of things?
Love stimulation.
Yeah.
I love to see babies getting stimulation, but I think there's also a lot of pressure on mums in particular when
having
they're on
to do baby massage and having to do everything.
Everything, like, you know, your gymboree, your baby massage, your, you know, sensory, and they're all great. You know, your swimming, they're all brilliant.
But it's not a competition.
It's not a competition. And like, if they don't go to baby swimming lessons, it does not mean that they're not going to be able to swim when they're 9. Like, my youngest did not go to baby swimming lessons. He's the best swimmer in the whole house.
Yeah.
So I would think, don't overload yourself. I like to say to mums in particular, maybe get out twice a week. And yes, go for coffee. And yes, meet other mammies and get out. And even just getting out is stimulating enough for your baby.
Yeah.
Do you know? That would be how I would feel. I don't think they necessarily need to be going to baby massage, need to be going to these things for their child to be sleeping well. When you get to a certain stage, certainly from 4 months, one of the great things that you can do too, actually, the things you can do around napping is a consistent place of sleep, so that your child has a place that they recognise as the place that they sleep. So it's a regular, consistent place of sleep. And start doing your naps in darkness. Because melatonin, the sleepy hormone, loves darkness. And like, the next question will be, how dark, Erica? As dark as dark can be. A 4-month-old does not need night lights, doesn't need the door open, doesn't need to sleep in bright light so that it will differentiate day from night. Melatonin is melatonin. It needs darkness for sleep, and it's not a fluke that we have curtains and blinds on our windows. It's to block out light so that we will sleep. So dark environments are key. And if you're doing those two things, you know, from 4 months on for your daytime sleep, you're going a long way towards supporting great napping.
Does that change as the child gets older, like the need for darkness?
No. Like, if as adults, for you and me, like, I'm a woman in my 40s. I'm actually very, very sensitive to light now since I went into my 40s. So I now have to wear an eye mask. I can't tolerate it.
I have 2 blinds as well. I can't see anything. Yeah.
Even in the summertime, there's like this, I keep thinking about it actually, in our curtains, there's a little sliver. And I'm like, I have to fix that before we start getting into the bright mornings. I think you can get more sensitive to light as you age. And I certainly see for babies between 6 and 9 months, if they're not napping in dark environments, then they're probably more likely to be waking after one sleep cycle, which is 40 minutes.
Okay.
So I would really recommend darkness for sleep for day and for night, full stop.
How does the sleep cycle work?
So during the day, sleep cycles are generally somewhere around the 40 to 45 minute mark. So that's why it would be so commonly reported that, you know, your baby goes down for a nap and boom, they're awake after 45 minutes. So it goes in phases. So they go into a light sleep phase first, then a slightly deeper one. And then during the middle of the cycle, they're in deep sleep. And then they start to cycle back up into light sleep again. And that's why they can be so easily woken after the 45 minutes. At night time, it's slightly different. We will generally find that children between going to bed and midnight will do deeper sleep cycles and they'll be more likely to maintain their sleep. And then after midnight, it becomes more cycle-based, where it's every 2 to 4 hours they will start to come into light sleeps. So I'll hear regularly, and I would think that anybody listening to this who's dealing with sleep challenges, they'll be nodding, because prior to midnight, things are settled. And after midnight, it's any man's game. You know, it could be like every hour, every 2 hours, every 4 hours, 3 hours. For me, it was every 45 minutes to 1 hour on my first that they're waking and not able to maintain their sleep.
And is that when older kids would have their nightmares as well?
What we would find is that actually prior to midnight is when nightmares or night terrors are more likely to present. A night terror is quite different. It's like a para-insomnia. You're stuck nearly between two sleep cycles. A night terror, a child won't remember. It will be awful for the parent, but the child won't remember it. A nightmare, they're more likely to remember it. Okay. So I would generally find reported from parents that it's prior to midnight that those are most likely to occur.
And is that more connected to the subconscious mind?
It's connected to the sleep cycles, and yes, the subconscious mind, that maybe as they're starting to come out of a deep sleep, the brain is activating, and that's why they occur, you know. So you would find that maybe you will remember your dream or your nightmare, and it might present that you've actually been in light sleep. So if you look at your Fitbit, I personally don't wear devices while I'm sleeping. I find that actually disrupts my sleep more. But you might see that you've been in light sleep more than you've been in deep sleep on those types of nights.
Interesting. White noise.
Yes.
How does it, like, I remember my first child used to fall asleep at like sunrise. It was horrible. So 5 o'clock, sun's coming out, and then she's falling asleep. But it was one night walking in the kitchen with her on top of me, and then I turned on the kettle and she fell asleep.
Yeah.
And I was like, what did just happen? And then that was magic.
It is magic.
So
it is magic. I never had white noise when I was having my kids. So my kids are older. They're 14, 12 and 8. And at the time of my parenting, it wasn't a thing. And it wasn't really until I started my journey as a sleep consultant that I started to hear about it being used.
Yeah.
Really, really started in the US. It basically helps the baby to maintain their sleep more so. So if you're playing white noise while they're falling asleep, you're giving them a consistent one level background noise. So there's not kind of different pitches and troughs going on in noise, and that'll help them go to sleep. The trick with white noise is you've to play it continuously throughout the sleep phase. If you are shutting it off or it is shutting off after 20 minutes, you're at nothing. You need to play it all night long or all through the nap, or your child is more likely to wake after one sleep cycle. That's the trick. So when you have that continuous level of noise, when they come into their light sleep phase, it's exactly the same as when they went to sleep. So the brain has this checking mechanism in it. It goes way back to when, like, we used to sleep in caves, survival. Yeah. So I'm going to sleep and it's going, I'm in the cave and, you know, mum's beside me and so-and-so's over there, temperature, everything. It's banking everything. So when you're going to sleep or a baby is going to sleep and there's white noise in the background, if that white noise is not there when they come into light sleep, the body's more likely to go, wake up, wake up, wake up. And then need it to be turned back on or something to happen for them to go into, you know, their next sleep phase. So when people ask me about white noise, I always try and talk about the proper use of it. I don't love it and I don't like dislike it, but what I want to bring parents back to is it wasn't there 20 years ago, and we managed and children slept. You know, it was never used in my day, and I never used it with my own children, and they slept. So I think if the fundamental, you know, supports of sleep are there, you don't need all these products for your child to sleep really well. And white noise is one of them. So it really, what it becomes is a noise blocker. So if you live in a busy housing estate, or if you live in an apartment block and you've noisy neighbours, or there's a dog incessantly barking, or there's unpredictability in noise levels for your children, then white noise can be extremely useful. But like, I live in the country, there's not really any noise, don't need it, never used it. And the kids all slept great. So I like, you know, you don't have to, it's not one of these you have to have for your child to sleep well. But it can help at times. Yeah, very interesting. I like that idea of blocking other noises, not just for the child to listen to, you know, because what I've heard is that it reminds them of the sounds that they would be hearing from the like those kind of muffled sounds. But even in the womb, there would have been peaks and troughs around noises. But yes, it can have that similar replication, or so they think. Do you know, like, obviously they're going by what they think it sounds like in there for little ones. True. But a lot of products that are out there, when they say it mimics something in the womb, then actually that can be an indication that it's actually not safe for the baby. Yes. You know, so like white noise is maybe a slight exception to that, but some of the other like sleep related products where it says, you know, that it mimics the womb, it's actually probably a product to avoid, because the environment inside and outside the womb should be completely different. You know, it's a new stage for them. It shouldn't keep being replicated. You know, that is a growth environment that's completely different for the baby. And, you know, they're connected by the umbilical cord. They're not breathing in the way that they would breathe outside of the womb. So I kind of like to steer parents to know that. Sometimes with sleep products, when they're marketed, they're actually not safe for sleep. And there's a good few out there that are like that I come across on a regular basis. Okay. Yeah, loads of them, unfortunately, loads of them. Wow. Yeah. And how come they're out there for sale? So a lot of the products are now being watched and regulated better, and they have the caveats in them that they are safe for supervised sleep. Okay, but so that's what we need to look for. If they're under supervision, it might mean. I would feel that it's very hard for parents to constantly supervise their child sleeping. It's not realistic, and I would think if a product is being sold for sleep and states safe for supervised sleep, then I'd actually avoid it, because that means well, it's safe for supervised sleep, but what if I stepped away to make a cup of tea? It's unsafe then. So I would think it's not safe. So all of the nests, pods and positioners I would consider not safe for sleep, and under the American Academy of Pediatrics, not safe for sleep, but they're incredibly fashionable at the moment. And I would think if you're using one, start gearing away from using them for sleep, and instead go for your flat surface that just has a fitted sheet and your baby in a cot or in a co-sleeper or in a crib, you know, in a Moses basket. They're the things that are safer for your child to sleep than in one of these marketed products, unfortunately. Yeah, thank you for that. Reflux and waking up in pain. Yeah. I had a refluxy one. Yeah. My first. Yeah. And that was one of the reasons why he woke so frequently. He was so uncomfortable. He would be very difficult to feed during the day, so he took very little during the day, and then he would wake during the night and he would feed, but then he'd be hungry, but it's also in pain. Yeah, screaming in pain after feeds. It's really, really challenging. Reflux is one of those things that you need to get support on. So like, parents will come to me going, my child is refluxy, how do I get them to sleep? And I'm saying your first port of call is your GP. You need to go and find the source of the reflux, find the cause, and then we can work on the sleep. So once the reflux is controlled, potentially medicated, that you found the reason, like tongue tie can be a reason for reflux.
Okay.
Do you know, maybe some kind of intolerance can be a reason for reflux. There's a lot of reflux specialists coming up, out there to support parents at the moment. Really great ones. We've one actually local to us in Naas. And going to somebody like that can help you get to the bottom of it. And then you can start working on the sleep side of things. So for me personally, with my eldest, nothing could have helped him sleep because he was just so uncomfortable. So he needed me. He needed me to lift him, hold him up, provide comfort, all the reassurance. But once I got on top of his reflux and he started to settle and I could see that he was taking more feeds, he was feeding more comfortably. He actually then started to do slightly, marginally longer stretches at night. Then I was able to start working on the sleep side of things. And once I did, I never looked back because it was a very, very foggy time for me because he was literally waking every 45 minutes to hour overnight. But when I did get the reflux settled, that was the thing that helped me to go, okay, now I can work on the sleep. So you have to find the cause, try and get it under control. Don't be fobbed off. A lot of parents are fobbed off. Go to a paediatrician if you need to. Go to your specialist. Talk to your public health nurse. Talk to your GP. Talk to other parents, and you will hopefully get solutions.
Yeah, that's really important because I would personally be the person that it'll get better, and maybe it's just me, or maybe I'm being dramatic over it, or just go look for help.
I think a lot of women feel like that.
Yeah. I'm failing at being a parent. I don't know how to do it because I'm only new and I'm
doing something wrong.
Yes.
And what am I doing? And why don't I know how to deal with this? And
because you're not supposed to know.
Not supposed to. They don't come with a manual. Are they feeling my energy because I'm anxious? I felt all of that. And possibly, yes, he possibly was feeding off my energy. But once he got comfortable, then I got comfortable and we both got comfortable together and we were able to move forward then. So I think lean in, don't be afraid to say, no, I kind of don't accept that solution if you feel you're being fobbed off, and push a little bit. I think we're terrible for that, oh, well, they said, no, I don't need that. But, don't second guess yourself. Mammies do know best, and daddies. Follow your gut. If you feel that you need more support on something, or the answer you've been given it's just not ticking the box for you, keep pushing a little bit.
Yeah.
You had a question.
Oh, yes, I had a question. It's back.
Again.
Holding your attachment. I'd like to talk about attachment security and feeling safe and holding your child too much and cuddling too much, and, the myths that we all hear, don't pick him up if he's crying. Or what are your thoughts about that?
I attachment is hugely important, and I can see it in my own children now that they're a little bit older. The work that you put in when they're small, you reap the rewards when they're older in terms of them coming to you and talking to you about things. Small kids, small problems, big kids, bigger problems. I'm definitely feeling that at the moment, even this week. So what I feel for parents is you cannot spoil a newborn. You hold them, you sit with them, you do whatever you feel comfortable with. Obviously responding to your child is hugely important, and it's part and parcel of parenting. When it comes to sleep, in terms of trying to get your child to self-settle, this is something that parents struggle with hugely, because if you've been very, very involved in them going to sleep, so the holding, the rocking, feeding to sleep, all these things, then if you want them to settle to sleep independently, then fading out and moving away from those is going to be part of the picture. And that is something that parents can really find hard, because if you make any level of change with your child, there can be frustration, understandably. But what I try and gear parents towards is you can actually do this really, really gradually. It can be done very slowly and very surely to minimise your child's frustration while still responding to them and still being present and having that attachment while you're both maybe relearning and you're doing it together. Rather than the thing of going into a room, putting your baby down and like walking out. And I think that's part of the sleep journey that parents can really find really, really hard, and why sometimes sleep challenges and sleep struggles will go on for longer and longer and longer, because even the thoughts of making change around it feels like a mountain to climb, because they feel like, well, if I make change with my toddler, they're going to have a tantrum. They're going to be really, really frustrated. If I make change with my 6-month-old, there's going to be frustration. Yes, there possibly will be, but you can still be responsive. You can still be there. You can still, have your hands with your child. You can still be shushing them. You can still pick them up. You can still do all of those things and still guide your child towards being able to sleep themselves. It's definitely something that I would like to talk about more for parents. And I'm really against the term sleep training. I don't like it because it takes one tiny element of working on sleep. And for me, there's probably 6 or 7 other elements that are involved in creating a settled sleep picture for your child that will still help you maintain all the secure attachment side of things and all of that interaction with your baby, rather than that one small piece of the picture.
Yeah, and you'll see the impact in the long term then.
Yeah,
because you don't see it, when you have that sleep training, you think, oh yeah, they're getting great sleep, so everything is working fine. But it's in the long term with that secure attachment it's not there.
Yeah, I think there's 2 sides of it. Sleep is going to support the development side for a child. There's no doubt about that. And it will also support the parent in developing as a parent, because if a parent is not functioning because they're not sleeping, well, that's going to have a knock-on effect with maybe their own relationship with their child. So the conversation, it's wide. It's very wide in terms of this. So I like to see a family unit functioning really, really well. And I think sleep is part and parcel of that. I saw that myself in my own, parenting. I needed to be getting quality sleep, and still do, in order to show up in the best way possible for my child. And I think some families will make the decision that we have to work on sleep, but all of the other secure attachment and being there and being involved with your child is still all part of it, from tiny baby right the way up to school going age and beyond. Do you know? So it's a wide conversation, that one. I definitely think that sleep is hugely important. You can work on your child's sleep in a way that will still have them feeling like you're present and attached. But getting sleep is going to help you be more present and attached, and then they'll feel more present and attached. So it's a huge, wide conversation, that one.
Yeah. No, I can see all the different factors, how affect us throughout the day, throughout the night, everything, that safety, everything.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's definitely part of our journey to be really, really responsive to our children. But I know from speaking to so many mothers that they're exhausted, and that resentments can come in, and that they can just feel like, even though they are responding and they are being present, that they just still feel like they're failing. So I do feel that support, quality sleep, open conversations are going to help parents to show up for their kids in the best way possible.
Yeah, I agree. Say 2-year-old wakes up in the night and goes to mommy and daddy's bed, and you want to bring him back. How do you do that?
So I like to look at the whole picture. So like what's happening in the daytime then. So 2-year-olds could be having anywhere between 2-hour naps to no naps. It can be that wide in terms of what a 2-year-old sleep need is. So if this is new for a parent, I will go to the naps and go, okay, what level of nap are they at? Do we need to shave a little bit of napping time off? I always recommend starting with 15 minutes and stick with a 15-minute shave off the nap for a week, and see, does that have a positive, result in terms of them staying in their bed? If it doesn't, then you've got to look at whether, has this become a habit? Is this become something that's a little bit of an expectation, that they come into your bed during the night? Or are they falling asleep with you physically present with them at bedtime? If that's the case, then when they come into light sleep, they think you sit there all night. So they're going, well, where are you? Come back, you know. So that's part of their falling asleep and also their sleep maintenance. So I like to recommend that instead of only looking at what's occurring during the night, look at what you're doing at bedtime as well, and start to fade back very gradually, like make a change every 3 nights. How much physical presence you have with your child when they're falling asleep. So for example, let's say you're lying in the bed with them while they're falling asleep. Sit on the bed for 3 nights. Then the next 3 nights you're sitting at the side of the bed, maybe on a stool or a chair. And then 3 nights later, you're maybe going arm's length from the child. So it's very, very gradual. It's not ripping the Band-Aid off. And eventually getting you to the point and them to the point where they're comfortable with you leaving the room while they're falling asleep. And that then is repeated for the wakes during the night. So if they're coming into you during the night and seeking you out, and that you're returning them back to their consistent place of sleep, which is their bed, and that whatever you are doing or stage you're at bedtime, you're repeating that at the overnight as well. And that's how you reset something that maybe has become an expectation or a habit or is just part of your child's sleep picture for a very, very long time. I'm actually just working through a process like that with a family of a 21-month-old at the minute, albeit he wasn't getting out of bed, but a lot of back and forth and in and out all night long, where parents were responding but leaving, and he was like having a very, very frustrated reaction to this. So instead we went with the position of stay with him while he's falling asleep, stay with him when he wakes during the night, and it has settled the whole thing down enormously. And now we're at the point at bedtime where he's going to sleep within 15 minutes of going into his cot with the parents standing outside the room, and he's sleeping for 11 and 12-hour nights. Whereas previously he was early rising, taking 2 hours to fall asleep at night and waking 3 to 4 times a night and like crying a lot, an awful lot. So now we've become more responsive, which has settled him down and means that he's not reacting the minute he goes to bed. And he's probably just feeling a little bit more secure, and we're fading the process out. So, yeah. So
it's really sticking to those habits and, you know, not trying for 2 days and then, it doesn't work and then back. Because what I did when my daughter was she would start sleeping through the night when she was nearly 4. So I had a 2-year-old, she was 18 months when he was born with the second one. So I had one on each side, and I remember both waking up, or one waking up, and I would go pick her up, but it was actually him. So I would wake up the other one. I was like, I don't know who's awake. Well, we're all awake now. So, you know, and then that's what I made a decision of let's just keep both here with me. And that worked for me, because otherwise I wouldn't get any sleep if I had to get up and settle them and then the other one. And I totally, I'm on board with that. You've got to choose what works for your family. And I think when parents talk about people like me, sleep consultants, they think that I'm only going to recommend that you sleep in the cot, and I'm only going to recommend that that you're independently sleeping. If you're coming to me with issues, then I am probably going to gear you towards independent sleep. But if you're co-sleeping and you're co-sleeping happily, keep doing what you're doing, because that's working for your family unit. Do you know? And that's what it's all about. Stay in your own lane, do what works for you. Whereas for me, I wouldn't have been getting any sleep, so I wouldn't have been able to show up for my kids. And that's why it wasn't for me. I wasn't able to get any level of sleep when my kids were in the bed with me, even though I had my 14-year-old in the bed with me this week because he was sick. But that said, I didn't sleep that night because, you know, he was sick. I was checking him. But I like my own space and distance when I'm sleeping, and I understand that, and I'm comfortable and respectful of myself with that. But equally, you were getting sleep with your kids in the bed with you, and that was working for you. Yeah. Keep doing what works for you. Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah. Do you know? Yeah. Well, obviously our relationship, the parents, we split up because things didn't go too well. But we got a good sleep, so I'll take it.
There's many parents who are still together and they're sleeping in separate rooms in the house,
Here's
and
hope.
that works
Here's
for them.
Yeah, just do what's right for you. And at that point, I thought my sleep is more important now than anybody's sleep because nothing functions otherwise.
Yeah, and you have to get it in the way that works best for you.
Yeah,
you do definitely.
Yeah. When those sleep habits are really strict, in some houses, we have to go to bed, we have to start a bedtime routine at this time, and then we do bath, and then we do this, and then things like Christmas happen or a family thing happen, and they never go anywhere because that's going to disrupt their routine. How can they... it's not going to really impact that routine for skipping it one day, is it?
So I have 7 steps to better sleep, right? And consistency is one of them, okay?
Don't listen to me.
No.
To her.
I have a point here and I will get to it. So consistency is one of them. And consistency around sleep is key. And even as an adult, in all the messaging that we're hearing out there about sleep, you will hear that. Going to bed at a regular time, waking up at a regular time, and having regular habits around your sleep is how you support your sleep. And that is the same for kids. Unfortunately, in the parenting world, routine is a bit of a dirty word, but routine supports children. They like routine. In your work that children like to feel secure, and routine helps them to feel secure. They know what's coming next. But I like to advise my families that 80-20 is best. Okay. You have to have a life. So 80% of the time you're in routine and 20% of the time you're out of routine in some respect. But you will need to get to know what your child is capable of in terms of how far can you stretch them. So with my eldest in particular, once I got on top of sleep, now, to be honest, I was petrified of undoing all my work. That's the truth. But I found that I could maybe be out of routine one day, not 2 days in a row, one day. And then the following day, he needed to get back into routine, or then he'd be out of sync for a week. Whereas my middle girl, she could do anything. She'd sleep at your feet. She was just so much more flexible. She's still the best sleeper in the house. She was just way, way more flexible. Anything went with her. My youngest guy, lower sleep needs. So you could stretch him out at bedtime. So if you were going to your aunties or your mothers or whatever for Sunday lunch and you were coming back later, he'd cope. Whereas the first guy, you could do that once, you maybe couldn't do it for the rest of the week. So get to know your individual child. Learn how they can be flexible. Some kids, they might have a short nap in the morning and a long nap in the afternoon, but you've something on in the afternoon, so flip it. Do a long nap in the morning and a shorter nap in the afternoon, but you can't then be going to bed at 9 o'clock when they're used to going to bed at 7, because then they'll just be overtired. There's knock-on effects. So get to know what works for your child, and there'll be a little bit of trial and error around that. You're not going to get it right every time. And then you'll get to know what you can stretch and what you can't stretch. But, when we're in routine all the time, we get bored. Yeah. And adults get bored. Kids will be fine. We will get bored. I know I go stir crazy and I love routine. But I need there to be a little bit of variety in the week and in the month in order for me to feel satisfied as a human. So definitely build it in. Don't be afraid.
And they need to know that that's how real life works. It's not always the same. It's not always perfect. Things happen. And
absolutely. We definitely are seeing it in a lot of babies that were born during COVID. They're unfortunately not as flexible for obvious reasons. Yeah. They didn't go anywhere, and they were at home a lot for those first 2 years. There's no harm in it, but as they get older, getting them into gently a little bit more flexibility around routine. That might be just going to bed an hour later where you've got something on, or napping falling a little bit earlier, or napping falling a little bit later. One of the most common questions I hear is, we have their christening. It falls at this time when they're supposed to be napping. What am I going to do? They're going to nap in the buggy that day, or they're going to nap in your arms. It'll be absolutely fine, and it won't undo any of the work you've done in relation to sleep. Let it go, chalk it down to experience. Bedtime might be a little bit uneasy, and maybe there might be a wake overnight. it's all right. You will be fine. They will be fine. Go back into routine the following day.
Yeah. Is it usually, now very generally speaking, would there be different first child because they've no siblings and we're more careful with everything, and then second child can sleep anywhere? Like my second child slept in the kitchen with the fan. It was like cooking a stew every nap. It was in the kitchen and just like throwing it in there. Is that a thing?
What I sometimes see is that the more children that parents have, the more flexible each child gets because they nearly have to be.
Yeah, no choice. With
no
learning,
choice.
Flipping, going on to after school.
Yeah. Like my youngest, there's a 4-year gap between him and the middle child, and he napped everywhere. Like he just had to because I was, picking up from school, or I was, going to like football or whatever. He napped everywhere. But what I do hear from parents is that sometimes they'll get a brilliant first sleeper and then they get the curveball second. Do you know, they get a unicorn. I sometimes refer to them as a unicorn first sleeper and curveball second. Whereas I got it the other way around. I got a disaster on my first.
So you're ready to fight.
Yeah, I was ready. Like I was totally ready for her.
It's
I was
so
like,
easy.
I'm going to do it all different this time. And she just did it. I don't honestly think it was, much of what I did. She just had it in her. But on my third guy, yes, he was really flexible on where he napped, but it took much more work to figure him out. And definitely I had to dip back into what I had learnt on my first to mould him into a settled sleeper, to help him be a settled sleeper. He probably wouldn't have been if I had just gone on the same road that I'd gone on my first. So I there's no straight answer to that. It's very, very different.
It just shows they're very resilient and they'll adapt to.
Very resilient, but very individual.
Yes.
I don't think if you have 5 kids that the 5th child is automatically going to be a brilliant sleeper. Do you know?
Yeah.
And equally, not every first baby is an awful sleeper. Kids are little humans. And they are born with little personalities and different ways that their bodies are going to function, and they're all going to be
all we need
different.
to do is support that. Just look, observe them, and support what they need. And
get to know them. A common thing I hear in consultations is, but their brother was a great sleeper at this age. But comparison, which is natural. We all compare. It's a natural human thing that we do.
But it's not good.
But it's something that we should try and get away from, definitely in terms of sleep. You've got even like fraternal twins. They are not going to sleep the same because they are siblings that have been carried at the same time. Two different people. With identical twins, they're more likely to sleep quite similarly. But with fraternal, no. So I will get like boy-girl twins and mum and dad are going, but like the girl's sleeping really well and the boy's not. And I'm like, but that's because they're two different beings and the boy needs a the boy needs a slightly different, daytime sleep routine applied. That's inconvenient because they're twins, but it's necessary in order to help the sleep picture.
Yeah. How did you become a sleep consultant? When did this happen?
Well, I suppose, as you've heard, my first child nearly broke me. And everywhere I turned at that time, 14 years ago, for help with his sleep, I was met with roadblocks. I was met with nothing, in fact. No, sorry, you just need to get used to it. One public health nurse told me that I wasn't coping, which resulted, to be quite honest, in a breakdown.
Whoa.
Yeah, you're not coping. Did you not realise what you were getting yourself in for? Yeah, very, very disappointing. And that, I'm the type of person that I will meet that. I will probably have a level of a breakdown, disappointment, cry. I will feel very, very, I'll be hard on myself. But then usually what happens is I'm like, no, but I can do it. I can do this. So I started to read everything I could lay my hands on about child sleep. So this is before iPhones. This is before like tablets, guys. I am that age. So
Google.
I didn't have I dial up internet in the house. Like we didn't have Wi-Fi or broadband or anything like that. So I read everything I could. And I self-educated because I didn't want that when I went on to have more kids, and I wanted more kids, despite the difficult journey I had on my first child's sleep. I didn't want it to repeat. So I read everything I could. And I applied that to my daughter when she was born and to my other son when he was born. And then friends and family, because I had like 3 settled sleepers, they would ask me, oh, this is going on, Erica, like, how do I resolve it? And they'd give me a bit of detail, and I'd be like, oh, well, try X, Y, and Z. And they'd come back to me a couple of weeks later, and say, it worked. And I went, oh, that's great. That's great. So in 2016, a really, really good friend of mine had miracle twins. And she sat down in front of me. We worked together. She sat down in front of me when they were 6 months old. She was back at work and the tears just blobbed down her face. And I was like, oh my God. She was like, they're not sleeping at all. Like, I was awake. She's like, I was awake every half an hour last night to go to each of them. And I was like, listen, give me a call this evening and we'll talk it through. We talked it through, and I formulated a plan for her. So this was before I was even a sleep consultant. I formulated a plan for her, and her husband and herself put it in place at home in terms of like prioritising daytime sleep, their sleep environment, like really what I now call my 7 steps to better sleep. And her husband jokingly said to me, you should be doing this for a living. And the light bulb went on. And I come from a family business background, but I didn't end up working in that business. But I always had this like itch, this entrepreneurial itch that I wanted to scratch, but I never knew what it was. So I decided I would go and I would research.
It was your call.
It was my call. Light bulb went on, and once it went on, I couldn't get rid of it. It kept coming back to it and coming back to it. I was like, God, is that a thing? Like, is it actually a thing? So it turns out it is a thing.
It is.
And I went and I researched for 4 months, because what I wanted was the most robust, certification that I could find that was evidence-based, that was devised by professionals and backed by medical practitioners to, be able to support families. And the only place I could find that was in the US. Okay. So before virtual classrooms were actually a thing, in 2017, I was logging into one once a week, and I was training with other women to become a sleep consultant. And I spent a year training while still holding down a full-time job and managing 3 kids in a household.
Getting them to sleep.
I don't know how I did that. And in very late 2017, I started Babogue. And in 2018, it grew legs due to the power of Instagram. And now I'm...
And you have your own platform, so you do everything online.
I do,
you have your own platform.
I do everything online. When I started Babogue, I was going to save one non-sleeping family at a time, and like sleep on their floors and everything. And I did it all. Like, I slept in their houses.
Oh, wow.
I went to their houses, but I felt it actually was restrictive. I couldn't help as many people as I wanted to. So I took the business fully online. I do all my consultations virtually, still have amazing success. And I created the Sleep Series, which is a suite of video-based sleep programs, all like, developmentally staged based. So like 0 to 6 months, 6 to 18 months and so on, right up to 10 years of age. And that is delivered completely online. Parents on demand, parents log in, they get all their information, but they can actually get support. So they go into a private community. It's Facebook based at the moment. I'm hoping to change that soon, where they can go in and they go into a non-judgmental space where they can ask questions. They get peer support from other members of the community and from me. So I log in every day. So before I even came to see you today, I was in there for an hour doing a live Q&A and answering the questions that are posted, because when I was struggling with sleep, there was no support. There was nobody I could go to and say, what type of napping structure would be supportive. I'm drowning, like I'm feeling like really despondent. Can somebody support me? There was none of that. So this is a safe place where mothers predominantly can go and ask questions about their child's sleep and get evidence-based answers. And
even
be
just
supported.
by sharing, you feel so much better, isn't it?
So
it's like you just got
better.
a full night's sleep just by sharing with other people and knowing you're not on your own.
Like a problem shared is a problem halved.
Absolutely.
And like you're going to share something and you think that you are the only person that this is happening to. But the truth about sleep difficulties is that if it's happening to you, it's happening to 100,000 other parents as well. The majority of sleep difficulties are development based. They're very normal. They're repetitive. Like, you will see them across. If you look at 100 children, it will be happening to 80% of them. Like 50% of all children born globally will present with some level of sleep challenge. Like, that's half of all kids. Like, that's huge. But yet our public health systems give parents no information about sleep when their children are born, which I would love to see change for the next generation of parents, that they go home with a manual. Actually, I'd love to see parents go home with a manual that tells them all about sleep, all the different sleep challenges, the different sleep routines, all the feeding challenges, like breastfeeding, bottle feeding, weaning, development, everything. I would love to see that happen.
A manual of hope.
I love that. A manual of hope is right. And that they would get support, that they would be able, they'd be grouped. This happens in Australia, where you're grouped with other women who have, and it happens in the UK as well. You're grouped with other women who have children at the same time as you.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
it's beautiful.
Amazing. Yeah,
and you go for coffee with them. They're in your locality. You meet up. You go to your classes, and like, you know, we don't have the villages around us. You know that. You're not parenting where you're from.
Yeah.
And I'm not parenting where I'm
from.
from.
That actually saved my maternity, because finding that tribe that you all share the same issues, the same problems, the same challenges, and share with each other and just laugh at it. Like just laugh, and you know, it's
coffee and cake sorts an
it's
awful
all you
lot.
Need, and all the classes and everything. That's, I think, for me, and that's why when I had my second child and I started doing workshops when he was only 8 months, and it was just to get that social input and then help them. Well, if I'm doing messy play, they get that stimulation. It's going to help them in their day. Parents are going to make friends here, and they would look forward to see each other again the following week. Yeah. So that was key.
I would love to see the public health take hold of that. Supporting that here. And also there seems to be huge differentials from county to county in terms of the systems that are behind mothers in particular.
It's so disconnected. There's no consistency anywhere.
No consistency, and a lot of resources, unfortunately, after COVID didn't get put back in again. Yeah. I'm really hoping that will return, but support is key. If I could say, if parents are going to take even one thing from this conversation, is ask for help.
Yes.
Get support. Make sure that you tell people how you're feeling. It is not wrong to be finding parenting difficult. Parenting is not easy. It doesn't come naturally, kumbaya, ukuleles by the fireside to everybody. It certainly didn't to me. But my children are very secure, very attached. They will always come to their mammy first. Do you know? And even though I may have struggled in the beginning, do you know what? It's all fine in the end. Yeah. Do you know? It's absolutely grand.
And
they're
asking for help is not a sign of failure.
No, that's a very Irish thing, that, you know,
It'll be grand.
They'll be grand. Keep the front doorstep clean. Don't tell anybody that anything is wrong. Everything's perfect.
It's not.
It's not. In fact, Instagram was perfectly created for Irish people. You know, that perfection wall. You know what? Ask for help, because what's happening behind closed doors, if it's not good and it's struggling, then, you know, the whole family unit feels that. So go out and ask for help. You'll feel so much better after it.
Yeah. Erica, thank you so much. I'm going to go off and put myself to sleep now.
I hope I didn't bore you.
No, it was really, really interesting. Really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us today.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you'd like to share your own story on our podcast, please get in touch through our social media. Don't forget to like, share and follow so you'll never miss out on upcoming episodes. See you next time!